Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back to my channel, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, with you guys today. Probably be the final video for 2018. So really what I decided to talk about today was Pluto and the soul. So I'm just going to unpack a few concepts and some insight about what it means when you have a lot of Pluto aspects in your chart, namely to the personal planets, and why that is incredibly important and incredibly revealing to your soul's evolutionary path. So where I might start is just simply by making the statement that if you are totally comfortable in your life, then you are not growing, really. The experiences that we have that are incredibly intense and life-changing are not comfortable, really, are they? They present us with a deep sort of seated insecurities that rise, fears, uncertainties, and so forth. So actually I'd just like to read this statement because it's just really a very beautiful way of describing Pluto. So this is an evolutionary platform that I'm using to describe Pluto in the astrological birth chart from the lens of evolutionary astrology and drawing from Jeffrey Wolfgreen's work. So Pluto in evolutionary astrology is the soul. It is immutable consciousness that can never be destroyed. It merely changes form throughout its evolutionary path. From an evolutionary perspective, Pluto has two levels of desires, we could say. The first part of it is what are called the separating desires from the soul. And the other level is what would be considered the desire to want to return back to source, to the divine. So the separating desires are the ones that push us out there, that kind of spit us out into the world and engage us, engage our life, engage our heart, our body, our mind, our spirit on a multitude of levels, all of which are about having various experiences. Those are the separating desires. They are deep desires that do connect to the ego as well, which connects to the sun and the moon. But the reason they are separating desires is because as they push us out to experience certain things in our life, those separating desires tend to move us further away from source, from the divine. And there is nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's just an experience that as humans we all have in pretty much every incarnation, you could say. However, on this path of evolution, as we are continuing to evolve, and the more we evolve, the higher we sort of reach towards our soul's desire to want to return back to source, then the separating desires seem to decrease as well. So I guess, another way of saying that would be to say that a person who's on a path, on a divine path of consciousness, who is awakened, who understands what their purpose is and why they are here and how they can serve, then they are usually the sort of person that would be potentially operating with a lot less desires of the ego. So that the ego always wants to go out there and experience these desires, which are separating desires, and they are necessary because they are part of the soul's growth and evolution. But it is the yearning of the soul that keeps calling us back to that divine connection, to that the divine spark of light, of divinity that lives within us, that is highly activated through the heart center, through the heart chakra, which then really activates our intuition and our third eye as well. So without the heart center being activated and open, without the intuition being open and activated, we operate much more from that lower ego level, very simply put. Now, a lot of our behavior is predominantly unconscious. In fact, most of it is driven from unconscious memories and unconscious forces. And that is something that is understood not only in astrology, but it's also understood in the world of psychology. So a therapist knows, for instance, when they are working with their client, that they are pretty much dealing with a lot of unconscious layers of what is being stirred up in the individual as the individual expresses and shares their story. So there are links. You know, what appears to be presented on the surface is not the entirety of the story or of the soul or the story, the picture of the person. So these underlying unconscious forces which drive so much of our behavior are not only linked to unconscious memories or unconscious forces from the current life, but also from every incarnation we've had. So, as I said before, the soul, it's indestructible. You know, there is no end to the soul and its journey. It can never be destroyed, but it changes form. This change of form that occurs in every incarnation is the ego that the soul takes on, which is the personality. That is every incarnation we have when we are born on a particular day, particular month, year, location, etc. That sun sign and moon sign that we are born into is what the soul is putting on, as it were, as a vehicle of expression. In your birth chart, when you have Pluto aspecting a lot of your personal planets, let's say, and let me just make a distinction here, because there is a difference when you have hard aspects and there is a difference when you have soft aspects. The first point, though, is that whether they are hard or soft aspects, they both pertain to the soul evolving. But with hard aspects, the evolution is experienced through many different processes of cataclysmic experiences or moments, which is like saying having really intensified experiences in your life that shock you, you know, that really, really shock you out of your comfort zone. And they are cyclic. So we go into these different cyclic periods of having a cataclysmic kind of shock experience, and then we go into a cyclic period of rest, as it were. So there's this constant movement and flow with these intense cataclysmic experiences, which are really seen through the hard aspects of Pluto to your personal planets. The hard aspects, just to remind ourselves, are the conjunction, square, opposition, and quincunx. The soft aspects can be a conjunction, but hardly. Trine, sextile, semi-sextile, and a couple of others perhaps. But in terms of traditional aspects, they are the aspects we are looking at. So when a person has a lot of stressful aspects from Pluto to their personal planets, the implication and the understanding, according to these teachings, is that the soul has specifically chosen to fast track, intensify the necessity to transform through those planetary energies in this lifetime. So, you know, there are some people that have a life where their life appears to be, you know, incredibly intense. There's incredible, powerful cycles of transformation and metamorphosis, and a lot of pain and suffering that comes with that, by the way. And that is seen through hard aspects of Pluto to the personal planets. And the non-stressful, softer aspects still imply a very important process of evolution, but the process of evolution has a real smooth process to it. So you could say that the personality, ego, is working in a much more harmonious flow and level with Pluto, the soul, to transform and metamorphosize whatever it is that it's touching. So whatever aspect that Pluto has to a planet. So if Pluto was trine your moon, let's just use the moon as an example, then the emotional transformation and metamorphosis that goes on, that will go on in your own life, is not as intense. It's not as dramatic. It's not as painful. There's a sense of ease about it, and there's a sense of no resistance. You naturally go with that flow of energy. And also with the soft aspects, one of the other distinctions is that when you have a soft aspect from Pluto to a personal planet, it is as though the soul has a connection to the deeper understanding and meaning and purpose as to why it has chosen to evolve through whatever planet Pluto is aspecting. So let's just say the moon, for example. Whereas if you have a moon conjunct Pluto or a moon square Pluto, then the emotional security is severely threatened from an ego place, because the moon filters much of our ego. It also contains a lot of our unconscious security needs as well. I actually just like to read something to you, and I'll show you which book I'm reading from in a moment. So the sun in the birth chart represents how this evolutionary process is integrated and given meaning. So the sun gives the meaning. You know, it's the mask, as it were. You know, it's the personality that shines forth, and behind that is the soul's forces coming through that personality. It's kind of like saying, well, if soul has no physical body, which it doesn't, then it needs a body to come through and to express and to communicate and to be and to experience and to evolve. So the soul chooses the body, which is the personality, which is connected to the sun and the moon, because the moon is actually the physical body, literally. And the sun is the light, you know, the shining force that enables that expression to come forth. And the moon contains the physicality of those expressions. I'll just continue to read. I might just start again and not pause. I'll just read this entire paragraph and then perhaps I can unpack it. Starting again. The sun in the birth chart represents how this evolutionary process is integrated and given meaning. The moon represents how this purpose, meaning, and karmic evolutionary condition is applied and actualized on a daily basis. The symbolism should be clear when we consider Pluto to the outermost planet in the solar system, because it is. It takes 248 years to do a complete lap. And the sun to be at the very center, because it is. Pluto represents the transmigration of the soul and the changing natures of the personalities that it manifests. Now, that statement there is really referring to the multiple incarnations that we have, because each incarnation we have, the soul takes on a different personality as a vehicle of expression. The sun gives each new personality of the soul a way to integrate and give meaning to its life. Since this drama is taking place on Earth, the moon, because of its proximity to Earth, shows how the new purpose and lesson is applied on a daily rhythmic basis, because the moon rules rhythms. It literally rules the rhythms in your body. It it rules the rhythms on the earth plane, the sea, the ocean, the tides, the waves, etc. Our body is made up of predominantly 80% of water. So you can imagine how much the moon is regulating everything that's going on with our internal systems. Our internal body clock is regulated by the moon. The moon can be correlated to the ego, and on that basis gives the personality a self-image in order for it to feel secure and know itself. So if the moon does this, which I believe it does, it enables us to form this an ego, a personality, which is central to the soul, because the soul needs to express. It needs a vehicle to come through. So the moon creates that, as well as the sun, just in different ways. Now, if the moon is creating that ego which connects to our security, the moon is always about security. And the moon is a very changeable, vulnerable, sensitive, fluctuating force and energy. That's why we have 8 phases in the moon's cycle. You know, the moon, it's not like we have a new moon and it just stays new and that's it, or we have a full moon and it's just full all the time. We see the moon go through so many different phases, which are really a very strong reflection of the changeability that the moon represents within all of us. That changeability it's flexible, it's fluid, but it's also vulnerable. So put Pluto next to the moon, Pluto's force and energy from an ego perspective, the moon feels completely threatened. It's terrified. It's like this big black dark monster or shadow coming at it. You know, Moon-Pluto aspects, don't underestimate them, especially when we're talking about a square conjunction or opposition, even quincunx. Moon-Pluto can bring tremendous insecurity in the individual, and it has many layers because it connects to the mother, the relationship that someone has had with their mother. It connects to their early childhood and the early childhood experiences that they had with their mother or their home environment, because the moon is the home. It connects to the feminine and mother within your own self. And it connects to your overall emotional security and how you function emotionally on a day-to-day basis. So when Pluto is right there with the moon, there's this incredibly intense underlying drive, feeling. A lot of things can be born out of a Moon-Pluto aspect. But as I said, from a lower level, it can produce enormous insecurity. And naturally, if you place that in a very difficult house, such as the 12th or the 8th, very, very difficult houses for the moon and Pluto, then you're adding many more layers of deep, intense fears and insecurities that can rise as well. Okay, so as I said, the stressful aspects usually point to an evolution that reflects the soul's intention to fast track a lot of their evolution in this particular incarnation, or whatever incarnation you're looking at. So the soul is not here to rest when they have a lot of hard aspects by Pluto. And it's more difficult when the person doesn't understand and can't associate or identify meaning to these trials and tribulations that they encounter, to these cataclysmic cycles that they go through. If there's no meaning or purpose connected to it, then it simply just feels like suffering, and it just simply feels like you've been dealt really hard cards, and it just seems unfair, and it seems shit, and it seems like, why do I have to keep going through this? Why do I keep attracting these kind of relationships? Why do I keep facing these sorts of problems in my life? Why does this keep happening? Why does that keep happening? Those questions come up frequently when a soul is resisting. Because see, the other thing about hard aspects is that the natural inclination is to resist the energy, particularly with a square. That resistance really just makes the journey, the evolutionary journey, the experience of metamorphosis, all the more difficult. It just feels like pain after pain after pain. So this is where astrology as a tool, as a deep spiritual wisdom and understanding can provide so much insight to the person, can really help them develop so much awareness and have meaning around the experiences that they are attracting. Because things just don't happen to us. We draw things into us based on our level of consciousness, based on our level of awareness, based on our unconscious desires and motivations, and so on and so forth. So when we have a lot of hard aspects, and therefore the implication is that the soul has chosen to fast track and intensify their experience here on this plane, in this incarnation, that calls for paying attention to that. Otherwise, the stance that one is left in is a sense of perhaps feeling victimized or feeling like their life is shit and everything just goes wrong all the time. And that's a very simplistic way of looking at things, because if we are not able to go deeper into ourself and to look deeper into ourself and to our behaviors and to our reactions and to the things that we draw into our life, and what it is we need to evolve through. What are we learning about ourselves through these experiences? If we're not asking these questions, and if we're not reflecting, and if we're not allowing ourselves to be open and vulnerable and transparent, then we're not going to understand. We're just simply going to be stuck in the pain of it. And being stuck in the pain it's not really conducive to growth. It just holds us back. So it's not about resisting these energies or these experiences. It's about understanding them and finding meaning so that you can get a clearer insight into what is it that your soul has chosen to evolve through and why. Why is this happening? And that will draw in the nodes in your birth chart, so the South Node and the North Node. When we are looking at Pluto and we're looking at the aspects that Pluto is making in the birth chart, we are always taking into account certainly the moon and the sun as a vehicle of expression of the personality, but the nodes, because the South Node is always reflecting and showing us the different types of experiences and conditions and personality kind of energies, you could say, that the soul lived in previous incarnations and is very, very familiar with. And that's the whole reason why we struggle to move away from the South Node. Now, just to be clear, their entire intention is not to dismiss the South Node and disregard it, because there's a lot of hidden gifts and talents that pertain to the South Node as well, because that's based on previous lifetimes. So, if you could see every single lifetime you've had consciously now, you would be blown away, really, on a number of different levels. That there'd be a mixture of things. There'd be dark things, there'd be light things, there'd be talents and gifts, there'd be, horrible things, there'd be a mixture of things. We don't have a one-dimensional experience, whether it's in the physical or the spiritual. So when we are looking at Pluto, we are always considering the nodes, because the South Node can help us understand more about the intentions of the soul in this incarnation right now. Because the North Node is revealing to you what the soul's intention and purpose is in this life to work towards. We always have to work towards the North Node. We can evade it, we can resist it, we can get stuck on the South Node. However, when we do that, we are holding ourselves back. So we are holding ourselves back from the natural sort of intention and progression of what the soul is trying to achieve in this lifetime. Now, I've talked a little bit about Pluto aspecting the moon in the chart. Another way of understanding the hard and soft aspects, and I want to do a separate video on this subject, and I will, but think about it like this. You know, if, for example, this year, 2018, let's just say that you've had a pretty cruisy year, pretty flowing sort of energy, and things have sort of been unfolding on your path quite effortlessly and smoothly, then it would be no surprise to me whatsoever that in your birth chart this year, you've had some really supportive aspects in terms of transit, okay? So you might have had some really soft aspects from Pluto, from Uranus, from Saturn. So it's kind of like the universe this year is giving you a bit of a break. It's giving you a breather. If you've had a year where there's been a lot of cataclysmic, cyclic periods of, you know, feeling shocked and out of your comfort zone, and then little periods of rest, and then it comes back up again, that would then be reflected through having some hard aspects from planets this year. So squares from Saturn, squares from Uranus, squares from Pluto. So it's not a year to rest. I've had that for the last couple of years. So I haven't been resting the last couple of years. I've been working on a number of different levels, both internally and externally. And that's reflected through the specific transits that I've had, which have been pretty much all hard aspects, squares and conjunctions, basically. So it's the same thing when you're looking at your birth chart and you see a lot of hard aspects from Pluto to personal planets. You know that overall, and this doesn't mean every single day of your life, but overall, this incarnation, you really have chosen, your soul has really chosen to evolve and fast track through very specific experiences. So if it's the moon, as I said, it's to do with your entire emotional security. It's to do with your mother. It's to do with the mother within you. It's to do with women. It's to do with the feminine quality, period. So there's a very, very deep desire from Pluto, from the soul, wanting to transform and metamorphosize and transmute the things that perhaps have held you back, the things that have become stagnant. It's also about disrupting the status quo. And those last few comments I just made about disrupting the status quo, breaking old habits, breaking free of restrictions and certain behaviors, all that sort of stuff, that can be applied with Pluto aspecting any planet in your chart, any planet. Because Pluto's intention is always to evolve. It's always seeking to transmute what is holding it back, and therefore what is keeping it from evolving. The soft aspects to the moon, as I said, you know, there's just a much greater ease of the emotional evolution that one is going through. You know, there's just an easier way of experiencing that, and when it feels easier through the softer aspects, as I said before as well, the person is able to connect to some kind of meaning and purpose to the experiences and the transformations that are happening. But with the hard aspects, it's much more difficult, because what happens is the ego kind of takes over, if you like. The ego starts kicking and screaming. Not wanting to make the ego a bad thing, because it's not a bad thing. It's an absolutely necessary component to our being. It's absolutely necessary, or it wouldn't exist, period. So it has a very important function. But if there is a disconnect from the personality and the soul, now to draw, to even esoteric astrology, which I've done a few videos on this recently, that apparent disconnect is what can make the metamorphosis, the transmutation that needs to take place, the transformation. It can make that experience or those experiences seem so much more difficult because the ego will naturally want to resist them. The ego does not want to experience any pain. It really doesn't. So it will do whatever it needs to do to avoid it when it's operating from that lower level, because it's not connecting to the soul, it's not connecting to spirit, so it's not understanding what it needs to learn and go through. So the only thing it understands is, I want to avoid this painful situation, I want to avoid this painful experience, so what am I going to do to do that, to have that happen? And the first thing to do is to resist the energy and the experience of what's presenting. So the sun, when it's the sun, it's very much connected to the father. It's very much connected to the person's personality and self-expression. And it can be said as well that it's a sense of very personal individual destiny that the person feels when they have a Sun-Pluto aspect. Now, the Sun-Pluto aspects, again, when we're talking about hard, stressful aspects, Sun-Pluto people really have a pretty intense life. So do Moon-Pluto people, just on a different level. The Sun-Pluto people are brilliant at best. They are brilliant at transforming their life, at regenerating their life, at going through the deepest waves, crashing right down to the bottom of the pit, and then basically resurfacing through regenerating and transforming and rising up again. That's the power of Sun-Pluto. So they have a lot of death, rebirth experiences, as so do Moon-Pluto people, but Moon-Pluto people go through that more on an internal emotional level, whereas Sun-Pluto, a lot of that will be seen in the way they express themselves and the way they express through their life. Now, as I said, it relates to the father, so that can be a really intense, overpowering connection relationship to the father. It can be a father who's very controlling and dominating, abusive. There's so many layers, so many layers. At the lowest level, it's extreme abuse, and at the highest level, it's the avatar, the agent of deep transformations, not only in their own life, but the ability that they have to assist others in their transformation and evolution. So a lot of therapists, for instance, usually have Pluto emphasized in their chart. Now, I'm one of those people because I'm a therapist as well, and I have Pluto actually aspecting everything in my chart. Everything. Inner planets, outer planets, angles, my whole chart. So that's another reason why I have chosen to work in the helping professions, and even actually in one of my harmonic charts, I've just forgotten which number it is, but it's a harmonic chart that connects to therapists and counselors. And in that chart, I have a Pluto-Mercury conjunction. Now, in my own birth chart, Pluto and Mercury are nowhere near each other. They are in an aspect, but it's an obscure aspect. Let me just think. I'm not going to show you guys my chart. I might one day, but not right now. This is an important point, so just bear with me while I just quickly get my chart up. Okay. All right, let me just, I should know this off the top of my head, and I do, but I just want to double check that I am correct in what I'm thinking. Yeah, I was correct. Okay, so Pluto is quincunx my Mercury in my natal chart, which is, it's a very, very close quincunx. It's only like a degree apart. But as I was saying, in one of my harmonic charts, which that particular chart reflects to the helping profession in terms of therapy, psychotherapy, counseling, psychology, that whole world, I have a Pluto-Mercury conjunction, which describes that part of my being and the intensity that I have from a mental perspective, and the desire to probe deeply into things that I research or study, or into the work that I do with my clients. So anyway, I just got a little bit off track there, but getting back to the Sun-Pluto people, if you have soft aspects, then again, you know, and this is going to apply with every single planet, you know, hard aspects imply the intense shock, cataclysmic experiences that can be quite painful, very difficult, but promote tremendous growth and transformation and evolution if the person doesn't resist those energies and can find a way to work through them. Just one point I want to make, and again, I'll unpack this further in another video that I want to do because it relates to transits. But let's just say, for example, you have a Sun square Pluto in your birth chart, which is a hard aspect. And that's a theme, a central core theme that is reflecting the journey of your life this lifetime on a number of different ways. It's not an easy aspect, but it is a very powerful one. However, it can internally, it can bring up a lot of internal conflict and resistance and struggle and very deep experiences that are hard to understand or work through. And then what can happen is at some stage in your life, you might have transiting Pluto coming along and forming a soft aspect to your Sun, let's say, for example, or to even Pluto in your chart. Then when you have that soft aspect coming along in one particular year of your life, that can be a really great year to work through a lot of the internal struggles that you've been going through with this natal aspect that you've got in your birth chart. And this year comes along where there's some soft aspects, and it just helps you. It takes away some of the edge, and by taking away some of the edge and making things feel like they are easier to step into, you're able to work with that energy. And there's huge, profound, powerful experiences that can come out of that 18-year period or so. 18-month period or so. Anyway, that's a separate video. I'll leave that one alone for now. When Pluto aspects Mercury, then clearly the soul is wanting to evolve the left brain. So actually, before I unpack that, Mercury also connects to siblings. So it is frequently the case that a person has either a really intense sort of connection or bond with one of their siblings, or real struggles, power struggles and difficulties. Now, power struggles can be seen with the Moon-Pluto and Sun-Pluto as well. Moon, mother, women; Sun, men, father. Mercury, siblings. Struggles, power struggles. It can be obsessive thinking. Mercury in Scorpio can be obsessive thinking. I have a client who has Mercury in Scorpio, and that is one of the issues that this particular client really struggles with. Pluto Mercury, it's also the energy that would, get into psychology, all that sort of stuff. As I've just mentioned before, even in my own chart, I've got a Pluto Mercury quincunx, and that really does describe a lot of my mental faculty and processes and things that I'm interested in and so forth. The Pluto there intensifies the left brain. The left brain is Mercury Gemini energy. It's it's the world of ideas and concepts that just float around. There's millions of them, of thoughts, if you like. They're not really anchored into anything. It's a bit like a butterfly, that Gemini, just kind of changing, and it's very changeable, mutable energy. But when Pluto is there next to Mercury, it intensifies that mental function in the person, and they need to penetrate incredibly deeply to understand things from that mental intellect level, but at an incredibly deep level. So there's incredible transformation, transmutation, metamorphosis that the person is, the soul rather, is choosing to encounter in this incarnation through the power of Pluto with their Mercury. So it's a real transformation of ideas and the left brain. And that could, that could be, for example, a person who lived several incarnations where they were just doing the Gemini thing, collecting data, collecting information, more information, more information, more information, more information, but not anchored anywhere. No real meaning to it, just information for the sake of information. So the soul comes back now with a Mercury-Pluto aspect, and it's really desiring to really penetrate much deeper into the world of thought and perception. Also, just one other thing that I read earlier is that when Pluto is aspecting whatever planets it's aspecting in your chart, the other implication is that this is not the first time that Pluto is aspecting these planets. So it's not the first incarnation in your evolution where your soul has chosen to intensify the evolutionary process and experience with these planetary energies, which symbolize very specific aspects of your being and your life expression. So the implication is that your soul has actually been working with these energies for quite some time. It's not the first time. An important point. Venus, well, I personally know all about that. I've got a very strong aspect between Pluto and Venus in my own chart. They are opposite each other, just about a degree away. So it's a very tight opposition. So when someone has a Venus-Pluto aspect in the heart aspects, the soul is seeking to evolve and transform through relationships, pure and simple. But it's not so pure and simple, because what happens is in the actual life experience, it's a very difficult energy to handle when you're much younger. I personally know this because I've been through it. It can be a very dark force. It can be it's a very magnetic energy as well. Venus is the magnetic principle, and the soul is magnetic as well. So you can imagine those two energies together, how powerful that is in terms of what one can experience in the realm of relationships. But the whole soul intention and purpose is to evolve and transform through those relationships, and none of that's going to come easy. Venus-Pluto opposition or conjunction, your relationships are not going to be easy, period. But it can relate, it certainly relates to your own self-worth as well, to your own self-value, and of course to the value of others and value of relationships and values in general. So all of those things are going under tremendous transformation and transmutation. And it's really about the soul's desire, wanting to understand itself from the depths of itself through the experience and process of relationships, because nothing teaches us more than a relationship, because a relationship has the capacity to bring out, to draw out, to trigger the things that we normally contain in all other aspects and situations in our life, where we might be very level-headed, we might be really cool, calm and collective, we might be really, intelligent, articulate and really creative and really functioning and doing really well. And then when it comes to relationships, somehow we lose touch with all of that. It sort of gets thrown around quite a bit when you've got a Venus-Pluto aspect, because it stirs things up from a very deep level, and it's all about the transformation and growth. And just one more, Pluto-Mars. Okay, that's an incredibly intense aspect, as you can imagine. Both those planets rule Scorpio. Mars also rules Aries, as we know. So you're talking about two planets of will. And the Sun is a planet of will as well, by the way. So when you have a Sun-Pluto aspect, it's two planets of will again. But the Mars-Pluto is at an even sort of slightly different level or scale of will again, because they are really, really planets of actual will. Soul will, and you could say physical sort of will, but the Sun would be physical will as well. Mars-Pluto can be the most explosive, dynamic, dangerous energy. In the wrong hands, that can create massive destruction in their own life or in the lives of others. It is an incredibly intense energy, incredibly powerful. It's almost hard to emphasize how intense this energy is. But the important point is this: from a lower level, as I said, it can be incredibly destructive forces to the self and to others, because it's operating from the lower desire level. Now, those lower desires are the ones that separate us from source, because they are very selfish and self-orientated. They are about self getting what it wants, what it thinks it needs, etc., with no consideration to anybody else, and certainly not to humanity. So, Mars, it can be on an ego level, that's pretty much where it operates from most of the time, unless one has, transcended their Mars, and I dare say most people on the planet probably haven't. But then again, I don't really know most people on the planet, so I shouldn't assume. But just generally speaking, Mars energy it's an ego planet, so it's really about your own desires. But when Pluto is there in aspect to it, through a hard aspect, then your soul has chosen this lifetime to transmute those lower, smaller sort of ego desires to enhance the ability of using the will, not just for self and selfish desires, but for greater causes and greater purposes. It can be, for women, it can be attracting violent men, aggressive men. For men, it can be, they can have that within their own self. On other levels, it can be incredible athletes as well, very, very strong-willed people, very capable. Don't underestimate a Mars-Pluto energy in a person's chart. But essentially, the soul is seeking to evolve those lower-level desires into a greater experience of the soul's desires. In any case, any planet that Pluto aspects in your chart, it's essentially speeding up the process of evolution, period. So depending on our level of awareness, we will either struggle with that, or we will evolve, flourish, and find meaning in the things that make us feel incredibly uncomfortable and challenge our security, because that's what Pluto does. It really challenges those little comfort zones and those safety nets that we build around us. Pluto is not looking for safety. Pluto is looking to transmute anything that appears to keep you safe. Because if you are safe and you are always safe, you're not actually growing or evolving. So I think I'll leave it there for today. And that's enough Pluto. It's pretty intense for a last video, but I did want to elaborate and share the things that I've shared with you guys today. I'm hoping that what I've shared is interesting and useful for you. Check out your own chart naturally, see what's going on with Pluto, and don't disregard minor aspects or obscure aspects. And if you want a chart reading or you want to understand more about what Pluto is doing in your chart from a soul evolutionary level or any other level for that matter, I'm always here, so feel free to contact me. And thank you so much again, guys, for watching and commenting and exchanging and sharing. And thank you to all subscribers. And yeah, keep your comments and questions coming. And I'll see you guys in the new year. And again, wishing you great holidays and many blessings for the new year, and be safe wherever you are, and see you guys soon. Thank you. Bye.